On the day she was meant to become a bride, Lena Moreau walked into St. Catherine's Cathedral wearing black. Not grief's black, not mourning's black, but defiance's black. The silk pooled at her feet like spilled ink, a funeral shroud for the girl she'd been. Every head turned, every breath held, because in Victor Cade's world, brides wore white or they wore nothing at all. And Lena Moreau had just declared war on her own wedding day. If you're ready to witness how a woman meant to be broken became the most dangerous queen the underground ever feared, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Lena's story travels. The cathedral doors opened with a sound like a gunshot. Lena Moreau stood framed in autumn light, her silhouette sharp against the glare. And for 3 full seconds, the assembled crowd of New York's most dangerous men forgot how to breathe. The dress she wore wasn't ivory or cream or any shade that suggested purity, hope, or surrender. It was black. Midnight black. The kind of black that swallowed light and gave nothing back. The fabric clung to her frame like a second skin before flaring at her hips, cascading to the marble floor in waves of raw silk that whispered with each step. No veil softened her face. No flowers adorned her hands. She carried nothing but herself and the weight of her own audacity. In the front pew, Victor Cade's lieutenant, Alexei Volkov, made a strangled sound in his throat. "She's lost her mind," he breathed, hand already moving toward the weapon beneath his jacket. "She's actually lost her—" "Don't." Victor's voice cut through the shock like a blade through silk. He hadn't moved from his position at the altar, hadn't so much as turned his head, but every man in the room felt the command in that single word. "No one moves." Lena heard it. Even from the entrance, even over the sudden electric silence, she heard Victor Cade's voice and felt it register along her spine like a warning. Good. She wanted him warned. She wanted him to understand exactly what kind of woman her father had sold him. Her heels clicked against marble, each step measured, deliberate. The cathedral stretched before her like a gauntlet, 50 yards of exposed stone, flanked on either side by men whose tailored suits couldn't quite hide the violence underneath. These were Victor's people, his soldiers, his captains, his enforcers, the kind of men who made problems disappear into the Hudson River wearing concrete shoes. They watched her walk like she was a ghost, like she was already dead. Maybe she was. "Christ!" someone muttered from the left side. "Is she trying to get herself killed?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, because everyone in St. Catherine's knew the truth. In Victor Cade's world, disrespect had a price, and Lena Moreau was about to pay it in blood. Except Victor still hadn't moved. He stood at the altar like a monument carved from shadows and expensive wool, hands clasped loosely in front of him, watching her approach with eyes the color of winter ice. Even from a distance, Lena could feel the weight of that gaze. Cold, calculating, absolute. This was a man who'd built an empire on fear and precision, who controlled half of New York's underground with nothing more than a word and the reputation that preceded him like a guillotine. And Lena had just spit in his face. The priest beside Victor looked like he might faint. Father Dominic had officiated mob weddings before. You didn't run St. Catherine's for 30 years without learning when to ask questions and when to keep your prayers to yourself. But this was different. This was chaos wrapped in black silk, walking toward the altar like a funeral procession for a bride who wasn't dead yet. Lena passed the 3rd row. The 4th. She kept her chin high, her spine straight, even as her heart hammered against her ribs hard enough to bruise. This was the gamble. The all-or-nothing bet she'd placed the moment she'd zipped up this dress in her father's house 3 hours ago. Either Victor would kill her for the disrespect, or what? A small voice whispered in the back of her mind. What exactly do you think happens next? She didn't know. That was the terrifying part. She had no plan beyond this moment, no strategy that extended past the cathedral doors. All she knew was that she wouldn't walk down this aisle in white like some docile lamb being led to slaughter. If Victor Cade wanted a wife, he'd get one. But he'd get her on her terms, even if those terms killed her. 10th row. 15th. The cathedral was so quiet she could hear the rustle of her own dress, the whisper of silk against stone. Could hear her own breathing, quick and shallow despite her best efforts to control it. Somewhere to her right, a man's hand tightened on his weapon. She saw it in her peripheral vision, the subtle shift of fabric, the tension in broad shoulders. Victor saw it too. Hands where I can see them, Marcus. His voice carried effortlessly through the space, soft as a knife sliding between ribs. All of you. Anyone reaches for a gun answers to me personally. The threat landed like a physical blow. Hands emerged from jackets, settled on pews, became visible. Because when Victor Cade made a threat, he kept it, always, without exception. The stories were legend, the underboss who'd skimmed profits and lost his hands before losing his life. The rival captain who'd touched one of Victor's businesses and watched his entire operation burn while he was zip-tied to a chair. The detective who'd tried to turn state's witness and disappeared so completely that even the FBI stopped looking. Victor Cade didn't make empty promises. He made examples, and yet here Lena was, making herself into the biggest example of all. 25th row. 30th. Close enough now to see Victor's face clearly. He was younger than she'd expected, 32, maybe 33, with the kind of brutal elegance that came from good genes and better tailoring. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have belonged to a Renaissance prince, if not for the scar that cut through his left eyebrow. A thin white line that spoke of violence survived. His suit was charcoal gray, custom fitted to shoulders that suggested he didn't rely solely on his reputation to win fights. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. Not because they were cold, she'd expected cold, but because they weren't angry. There was no rage in Victor Cade's winter blue gaze as he watched her approach, no fury at her disrespect, no murder in the set of his jaw. There was interest, pure, undiluted, predatory interest, like he'd just discovered a puzzle he couldn't wait to solve, even if solving it meant taking her apart piece by piece. Lena's step faltered, just once, just for a fraction of a second, but Victor saw it. She watched his mouth curve, not quite a smile, more like a promise wrapped in dark amusement. "Keep walking, Lena." Her name in his mouth sounded like a caress and a threat. "We're almost at the interesting part." The interesting part? As if her rebellion was entertainment. As if her defiance was something to be enjoyed rather than punished. The realization sent ice down her spine. She'd miscalculated. Somewhere in her planning, in her desperate bid for control, she'd made a critical error. She'd assumed Victor would react like her father, with rage, with violence, with the kind of masculine fury that turned deadly when questioned. She'd dressed for her own funeral because she genuinely believed he'd give her one. But Victor Cade wasn't her father. Victor Cade was something else entirely, something worse. Lena reached the altar steps. Up close, Victor was taller than she'd realized, 6'2" or 6'3", of controlled power and tailored menace. The scent of his cologne hit her, something dark and expensive, cedar and smoke, and she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Black. Victor's voice was conversational, almost pleasant, as if they were discussing the weather instead of her calculated insult to his authority. Bold choice for a wedding. I thought it was appropriate. Lena kept her voice steady through sheer force of will. Since this is a funeral. Is it? One dark eyebrow rose, the scarred one, giving his expression a sardonic tilt. Whose? Mine. She lifted her chin. The girl I was before you bought me. The words landed in the silence like stones in still water. Around them, Victor's men shifted, tense, waiting for their boss's reaction. Father Dominic made a small, distressed sound. Even Alexei, stone-faced and loyal to his core, looked uncertain about what would happen next. But Victor just studied her, his gaze traveling slowly from her face to the black silk pooling at her feet and back again. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly through the cathedral. Your father told me you were broken. Victor's tone was thoughtful, analytical. Grieving, obedient. He promised me a widow who'd be grateful for protection. My father, Lena said clearly, is a liar who sold his daughter to pay his debts. Yes. Victor's agreement was immediate, casual. He is. The admission shocked her. She'd expected denial, or at least some pretense of civility about the transaction that had brought her here, but Victor offered neither. Marcus Moreau owed me $3 million, Victor continued in that same conversational tone. plus interest, plus the cost of my patience, which isn't cheap. When he couldn't pay, he offered me you instead. His eyes locked on hers, winter bright and unreadable. He showed me pictures, told me you were sweet, biddable, that you'd make a perfect society wife. And you believed him? Lena couldn't keep the scorn from her voice. Victor's smile was sharp enough to cut. I did my research. Lena Moreau, 26, art history degree from Columbia, widowed after 6 months of marriage when her husband wrapped his Porsche around a tree on the Taconic, spent the last 3 years working in her father's gallery, living quietly, causing no trouble. He paused. Seemed biddable to me. Then you didn't look hard enough. Apparently not. Victor's gaze dropped to her dress again, and this time something heated in his expression. Though I'm starting to think Marcus did me a favor. The broken ones are boring, but you... He stepped closer, close enough that Lena had to resist the urge to retreat. You might actually be interesting. I'm not here to be interesting. Lena forced herself to hold her ground even as Victor invaded her space. I'm here because I didn't have a choice. We always have choices, Lena. Victor's voice dropped lower, intimate despite the audience. You chose black. You chose to walk down this aisle instead of running. You chose to stand here and trade insults with me in front of 100 men who could kill you without breaking a sweat. His hand came up, fingers catching her chin, tilting her face toward the light. You're choosing to be brave even though you're terrified. I can feel you shaking. She was. Lena realized with horror that her whole body was trembling, fine tremors she couldn't control running through her frame like an earthquake. Victor's thumb brushed her jawline, a touch that should have been gentle but felt like a brand. So here's what's going to happen, Victor continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the cathedral. We're going to finish this wedding, you're going to say your vows, and then you're going to belong to me, not because your father sold you, but because you chose to stay instead of running when you had the chance. I didn't, Lena started. You did. Victor's grip tightened fractionally. You could have disappeared. New identity, new city, gone before anyone noticed. You have a college degree, you're smart enough to build a new life. But you didn't run. You came here. You put on this dress, and you walked down my aisle, and you looked me in the eye. His own eyes blazed suddenly, cold fire that burned without heat. That was a choice, Lena. Own it. The truth of his words hit her like a slap. He was right. She'd told herself she had no options, that her father's debts had trapped her, but that was a lie she'd fed herself to make this easier. She could have run, could have vanished into the anonymity of any big city with nothing but her degree and her determination. But she'd stayed. She'd put on this black dress, and she'd walked into St. Catherine's Cathedral knowing exactly what it meant. The question was, why? Lena's voice caught, started again. I won't be your victim. Good. Victor's smile was fierce, approving. I don't collect victims. I collect assets. And you, Lena Moreau, are about to become my most valuable one. He released her chin and turned to Father Dominic, who stood frozen beside the altar like a man watching a car crash in slow motion. Begin. Father Dominic cleared his throat. Once. Twice. The ceremony... Traditionally, the bride is in... Begin, Victor repeated, and this time the command was absolute. The priest opened his book with shaking hands. Dearly beloved, Father Dominic's voice wavered, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Victor Cade and Lena Moreau in holy matrimony. The words washed over Lena like a tide. This was happening, actually happening. In minutes she'd be bound to this man, this stranger, this crime lord who looked at her like she was a problem to solve and a prize to claim all at once. Do you, Victor Cade, Father Dominic intoned, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do. Victor's voice was steady, certain, like he was signing a contract rather than making a vow. His eyes never left Lena's face. And do you, Lena Moreau, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, from this day forward, For better or worse, no. The word left Lena's mouth before she could stop it. Not loud, not shouted, but clear enough to carry. Clear enough to freeze every person in the cathedral for the second time in 20 minutes. Father Dominic's book snapped shut. Alexei swore under his breath. Somewhere in the back, a gun cocked, the sound obscenely loud in the silence. Victor's expression didn't change. If anything, his smile deepened. No? He repeated, like he was tasting the word. Not those vows. Lena's heart was trying to break through her ribcage, but she forced the words out anyway. I won't promise to obey a man who bought me. I won't vow to honor a transaction disguised as a marriage. Oh, what will you promise then? The question surprised her. She'd expected rage, violence, the punishment she'd been courting since she'd first seen this dress. But Victor just watched her, waiting, like her answer actually mattered. Lena took a breath, then another. I'll promise not to run, not to betray you, not to undermine you in front of your people. The words came faster now, building momentum. I'll promise to be loyal as long as you are, to stand beside you as long as you don't treat me like property, to be your partner if you treat me like one. And if I don't, Victor's voice was soft, dangerous, then I'll make your life hell until one of us breaks. The silence that followed was absolute. Every man in the cathedral held his breath, waiting to see if Victor Cade would kill his bride before the ceremony even finished. Instead, Victor laughed. It wasn't a polite chuckle or a dark amusement. It was genuine laughter, rich and startled, like Lena had just told the best joke he'd heard in years. The sound echoed off the cathedral's vaulted ceiling, bouncing back at them in waves. You'll make my life hell, Victor repeated when he could speak again, his eyes bright with something that might have been delight. You, Lena Moreau, all 5'6" of you, are threatening to make my life hell. Yes, Lena lifted her chin. I am. Fair enough. Victor turned to Father Dominic, whose face had gone pale as chalk. You heard her terms. Add them to mine. I don't think the church... I don't care what the church thinks. Victor's voice went hard. These are our vows. Write them down if you want. Or don't. But we both know this marriage has nothing to do with any god and everything to do with what happens when we leave this building. So I'll say my piece, she'll say hers, and you'll declare us married. Understood? Father Dominic nodded shakily. Victor turned back to Lena, and when he spoke, his voice carried through the cathedral like a pronouncement. Lena Moreau, I take you as my wife. Not because your father sold you, but because you walked down that aisle in black and looked me in the eye without flinching. I promise you protection, from my enemies and from me. I promise you respect in front of my people. I promise you power if you prove you can handle it. And I promise you this, no one touches you without answering to me. No one hurts you. No one disrespects you. You're mine now, and I protect what's mine with everything I have. The vows were nothing like the traditional promises. They were darker, sharper, carved from the same brutal honesty that seemed to define Victor Cade. But they were also, Lena realized, a kind of promise she could believe. Because they didn't ask her to be something she wasn't. They acknowledged exactly what she was walking into. Victor held out his hand. Your turn. Lena looked at that outstretched hand, scarred knuckles, long fingers, the kind of hand that could break bones or sign death warrants with equal ease. If she took it, there was no going back. This would be real, binding. The end of one life and the beginning of something else entirely. She took his hand. Victor Cade, her voice was steady now, stronger. I take you as my husband. I promise loyalty as long as you give it in return. I promise to stand with you against your enemies. I promise to be your partner, not your possession. And I promise you this, I won't be broken. Whatever you think you're getting in this bargain, understand that I'm not here to be owned. I'm here to survive. And I will. Their eyes locked. For a long moment, neither moved, the weight of what they'd just promised hanging in the air between them like smoke. Then Victor pulled her closer, his free hand sliding around her waist, drawing her against him in a clear display of possession that made several men in the audience shift uncomfortably. Kiss her, someone called from the back. Make it official. Victor's smile was sharp. With pleasure. His mouth came down on hers before Lena could brace herself. The kiss wasn't gentle or chaste or anything resembling appropriate for a church. It was claiming, possessive, designed to make a point to every person watching. Lena Moreau belonged to Victor Cade now, and he had no intention of being subtle about it. Lena's first instinct was to pull away, to resist the display. But something stopped her. Maybe pride, maybe strategy, maybe the simple acknowledgement that she'd walked into this cathedral in black and couldn't back down now. So she kissed him back, met his intensity with her own, let her hands come up to grip his shoulders, to pull him closer instead of pushing away. If Victor wanted to make a statement, she'd make one too. She might be his wife now, but she wasn't his victim. When they finally broke apart, Victor's eyes were blazing with something that looked like approval and hunger mixed together in equal measure. "Interesting," he murmured, quiet enough that only Lena could hear. "Very interesting." Father Dominic cleared his throat weakly. I now pronounce you husband and wife." The cathedral erupted. Not with applause, this wasn't that kind of crowd, but with the rustle of movement, the release of held breath, the collective exhale of 100 dangerous men who'd just watched their boss turn a wedding into a power play. Victor kept Lena's hand in his as he turned to face the congregation. His grip was firm, commanding, the kind of hold that suggested he had no intention of letting go. "Most of you know why we're here," Victor's voice cut through the noise. "Marcus Moreau owed me a debt he couldn't pay. This is how debts get settled in our world. But let me be crystal clear about something. Lena isn't payment. She's not a possession. She's my wife. That means she has my protection, my resources, my name." His eyes scanned the crowd, cold and absolute. "Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. Anyone who threatens her threatens me. Anyone who so much as looks at her wrong will find out exactly why people fear the Cade name." The message landed with the weight of a death sentence. Every man in that cathedral understood. Lena Moreau Cade wasn't a weakness to exploit. She was a line drawn in blood. "Now," Victor's voice lightened fractionally, "let's celebrate." The reception was held at Aurelius, Victor's flagship restaurant in Tribeca. The entire place had been closed for the event, its soaring windows covered with heavy drapes, turning the space into a private fortress of marble, crystal, and candlelight. Lena sat at the head table, Victor's hand possessive on the small of her back, and watched the crowd of criminals celebrate her wedding like it was something normal, like she hadn't just signed her life away to a man whose reputation preceded him like a plague. The food was exquisite, courses that would have cost a month's rent anywhere else, prepared by a chef who'd won 3 Michelin stars and knew better than to ask questions about his employer's business. Wine flowed freely. Champagne appeared in waves. Around them, men in expensive suits traded stories and deals with the ease of long practice. And through it all, Victor kept her close, not touching her constantly, but maintaining a connection, a hand on her chair, fingers brushing her shoulder, his body angled toward hers in a way that declared ownership to everyone watching. It should have felt suffocating. Instead, it felt strategic. "You're quiet," Victor observed, his breath warm against her ear. "I'm thinking." "About?" "About whether I just made the biggest mistake of my life." Victor's laugh was low, dark. "Ask me again in a month. You might have a better answer by then." Before Lena could respond, a commotion erupted near the bar. Raised voices, the sound of glass breaking. Victor's hand tightened on her waist briefly before releasing her. "Stay here," he ordered, already rising. But Lena stood too, drawn by some instinct she couldn't name. She arrived at the bar in time to see Alexei restraining a younger man, mid-20s, drunk, with Victor's sharp features softened by dissipation and rage. "Cousin Nikolai," Victor's voice was flat. "I didn't realize you'd started the celebration early." "Celebration?" Nikolai spat, his words slurred. "You call this a celebration? You marry some whore in a black dress and expect us to—" The backhand came so fast Lena barely saw it. One moment Nikolai was speaking. The next he was on the floor, blood streaming from his split lip, Victor standing over him with murder in his eyes. "What did you call my wife?" Nikolai's gaze, hazy with alcohol and pain, found Lena. "Everyone knows what she is. Marcus Moreau's daughter, sold like cattle to pay his debts. You think putting a ring on it makes it different? She's still a—" Victor's hand closed around Nikolai's throat, cutting off the words. The restaurant went silent. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned toward the tableau at the bar. Victor Cade, usually so controlled, usually so calculated, holding his cousin by the throat like a rag doll. "You insult her again." Victor's voice was conversational, almost pleasant, which somehow made it more terrifying. "And I'll remove your tongue, personally, with a rusty knife. Then I'll take your hands, then your life, in that order. Do you understand?" Nikolai made a strangled sound that might have been agreement. "I didn't hear you." "Yes," Nikolai gasped. "Yes, I understand." Victor held him for another 3 seconds, long enough to make his point, not quite long enough to cause permanent damage, then released him. Nikolai collapsed to the floor, gasping, one hand clutching his bruised throat. "Alexei." Victor's voice was calm now, settled back into the iron control Lena was beginning to recognize. "Escort my cousin out. He's had too much to drink." "Of course, boss." As Alexei hauled Nikolai toward the exit, Victor turned to the watching crowd. "Anyone else want to question my choice in wives? Now's your chance. I'm in a generous mood." Silence. Complete and absolute. Victor nodded once, satisfied, then returned to the head table like nothing had happened. But when he sat down, Lena saw his knuckles were bleeding. He'd hit Nikolai hard enough to break skin. "You didn't have to do that," Lena said quietly. "Yes," Victor corrected. "I did. There are rules in this world, Lena. Once you let someone disrespect you without consequences, everyone tries. Nikolai tested me. I answered. Now everyone else knows better." "He's your family." "He's a liability." Victor's eyes were cold as he examined his knuckles. "Family doesn't mean protection in my world. It means you get 1 warning instead of 0. Nikolai used his. If there's a next time, there won't be anything left to bury." The casual brutality of the statement should have shocked her. Maybe a week ago it would have. But sitting here in her black dress, wearing Victor Cade's ring, Lena found she wasn't surprised at all. This was her life now. This world of violence wrapped in expensive suits, where loyalty was currency and disrespect was paid for in blood. The reception continued. More courses appeared. More toasts were made, each one carefully worded to avoid any suggestion of weakness or disrespect. Victor's men understood the new reality. Lena Moreau Cade was untouchable. Around midnight, Victor leaned close. "We should go." Lena's stomach tightened. The wedding night. She'd been trying not to think about it, trying to focus on the immediate challenges of surviving the ceremony and reception. But now the inevitable loomed. Where? "My home. Our home now, I suppose." Victor stood, offering his hand. "Unless you'd prefer to stay here and keep celebrating with this crowd?" Lena looked at the assembled criminals, many of them drunk now, all of them dangerous. "No, let's go." The drive was short, a sleek black car with bulletproof windows and a driver who kept his eyes straight ahead. Victor sat beside her in silence, his hand resting on her knee, a gesture that could have been possessive or protective. Probably both. The building was in Soho, a converted warehouse with the kind of anonymous elegance that screamed money. Victor's penthouse occupied the entire top floor, accessed by a private elevator that required both a key and a fingerprint to operate. "Welcome home," Victor said as the doors opened directly into a sprawling, open-plan space. Lena stepped out onto polished concrete floors. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Manhattan glittering below them like scattered diamonds. The furniture was minimalist, expensive, masculine, all clean lines and neutral colors. Art hung on exposed brick walls, pieces Lena recognized from her gallery days. Real art, not the flashy displays of wealth some criminals favored. "The master bedroom is upstairs," Victor indicated a floating staircase. "There are 2 guest rooms on this level if you prefer." The offer surprised her. "You're giving me a choice?" "I told you this afternoon. I don't collect victims." Victor moved to the windows, his silhouette sharp against the city lights. "I meant what I said in those vows, Lena. Protection, respect, power. But I also meant the part about you being mine. So here's how this works. You get your own space, your own room if you want it. I won't force myself on you. But eventually, you'll come to me. Because this marriage isn't just paperwork. It's a partnership. And partnerships require trust. Trust. Lena let the word hang in the air. You want me to trust the man who married me to settle my father's debts? No. Victor turned to face her. I want you to trust the man who broke his cousin's face for insulting you. The man who gave you vows that acknowledge what you are instead of what I wanted you to be. The man who's telling you right now that you can sleep in a locked room and I won't touch the door. He moved closer, close enough that Lena could see the flecks of darker blue in his winter eyes. I don't need to force you, Lena. Eventually you'll see that being my wife is better than any alternative, and when you do, you'll make the choice yourself. The arrogance of the statement took her breath away. He was so certain, so absolutely confident that she'd fall into line given enough time. The terrifying part was, he might be right. The guest room, Lena said. For tonight. Victor smiled. Of course, second door on the left. You'll find everything you need. If you want something that's not there, tell Maria tomorrow. She manages the household. And tomorrow? Tomorrow we start figuring out what this partnership looks like. Victor turned back to the windows. Get some rest, Lena. You've had a long day. It was a dismissal, gentle but absolute. Lena found the guest room exactly where Victor had indicated, a space that was both impersonal and luxurious, with a bed that could sleep four and a bathroom that belonged in a spa. She locked the door, stripped off the black dress, stood under water hot enough to scald until her skin turned pink. And only then, alone in Victor Cade's guest room, wearing a borrowed robe, did Lena Moreau allow herself to cry. Not for what she'd lost. That girl was dead the moment her father had sold her. But for what she'd become. The Black Bride. The crime lord's wife. A woman who'd walked into a cathedral wearing defiance and come out wearing chains made of platinum and promises. Tomorrow, she'd figure out how to survive this new life. Tonight, she let herself mourn the old one. In the main bedroom one floor above, Victor Cade stood at his own window and smiled into the darkness. His new wife thought she was playing chess, thought her black dress and brave words gave her some measure of control. She had no idea she'd just walked into a game that had been in motion long before she'd arrived. But she'd learn. Victor would make sure of that. After all, he hadn't built an empire by settling for simple victories. And Lena Moreau, fierce, defiant, absolutely terrified and trying not to show it, was going to be his most satisfying conquest yet. The black dress had been her declaration of war. Victor couldn't wait to see what she'd do when she realized he'd been planning this battle for months. Lena woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee drifting up from somewhere below. For 3 disoriented seconds, she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed back. The cathedral, the black dress, Victor's winter eyes watching her like she was a puzzle he intended to solve. She was married to a crime lord. The thought still didn't feel real, even with the platinum band gleaming on her finger, even with the soreness in her jaw from clenching it through yesterday's ceremony. Lena sat up slowly, taking stock of her surroundings in the morning light. The guest room was elegant in its simplicity, all clean lines and muted colors, but it was still a cage. A gilded one, perhaps, but a cage nonetheless. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Cade? The voice was female, accented, Eastern European, maybe Russian. I have breakfast if you're awake. Lena found a robe in the closet, silk, expensive, still bearing tags, and wrapped herself in it before opening the door. The woman on the other side was in her 50s, gray-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing simple black pants and a crisp white shirt. Her face was kind but carefully neutral, the expression of someone who'd learned not to ask questions. I'm Maria, she said, offering a slight smile. Mr. Cade asked me to make sure you had everything you need. I've set breakfast in the dining room, but I can bring it here if you prefer. The dining room is fine. Lena's voice came out rougher than intended. Give me 10 minutes? Of course. Take your time. The clothes in the guest room closet fit perfectly. Jeans in her exact size, sweaters, shirts, even undergarments still in packaging. Victor had been prepared. The realization sent a chill down her spine. How long had he been planning this? Her father had presented the arrangement like it was sudden, desperate, the only way to settle his debts. But this level of preparation suggested Victor had known exactly what he was getting, and when. She dressed quickly, avoiding her reflection in the mirror. She wasn't ready to see what looked back: widow, daughter, wife. All roles she'd never chosen, identities layered on her like paint, until the original canvas disappeared beneath. Victor was waiting in the dining room, perfectly dressed despite the early hour, reading something on his phone while steam rose from a cup of black coffee. He looked up when Lena entered, and she saw his gaze track over her, assessing, calculating, filing away information. "You found the clothes." It wasn't a question. "Hard to miss them." Lena sat across from him, maintaining distance. "How long have you been planning this?" "Planning what? The wedding?" Victor set down his phone, giving her his full attention. The weight of that focus was nearly physical. "Or the marriage?" "Either. Both. Your father approached me 6 months ago about his debts. I considered several payment options before deciding on this one." Victor's tone was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing a business acquisition. "I had you investigated 3 months ago, watched you for 2. Made my offer to Marcus 5 weeks ago. The wedding was scheduled 3 weeks after that." The casual admission of surveillance should have shocked her. Instead, Lena found herself asking, "What did your investigation find?" "That you're smarter than your father, more controlled than your late husband. That you spent 3 years working in a gallery you hated because you thought you owed Marcus for raising you alone after your mother died." Victor lifted his coffee cup. "That you have good instincts about art and terrible instincts about people. That you loved your husband right up until the moment the police told you he'd been drunk when he crashed. That you haven't touched alcohol since his funeral." Each observation landed like a stone. He knew everything. The fights with James about his drinking, the nights she'd pretended not to notice the slurred words and reckless behavior, the guilt that had eaten at her since the crash, guilt that maybe if she'd tried harder, done something different, he'd still be alive. "You investigated my dead husband? I investigate everything that matters to me. And you, Lena, matter a great deal now." Victor gestured to the food Maria had laid out. Pastries, fruit, eggs prepared 3 different ways. "Eat. We have a long day ahead." "Doing what?" "Getting you settled. Maria will help you move your things from your father's house. You'll need a security detail. I've assigned 2 men who'll stay with you whenever you leave the building. And tonight, we're having dinner with my inner circle. They need to see us together, understand the new dynamic." Lena's hand stilled over the coffee pot. "I'm not a show dog to parade around." "No," Victor agreed calmly. "You're my wife, which means people will watch how I treat you and adjust their behavior accordingly. If I keep you hidden, they'll think you're a weakness. If I display you but treat you like property, they'll think you're disposable. But if I show them you have my respect, my protection, my ear, then they'll give you the same." The logic was sound, even if the execution made her skin crawl. "And if I refuse?" "Then you make both our lives harder for no good reason." Victor leaned back in his chair. "I told you yesterday, this is a partnership. That means sometimes you do things that benefit us both, even if you don't particularly want to. Tonight is one of those things." "What else falls under partnership duties?" Lena kept her voice level, but barely. "Honesty, loyalty, public unity, private negotiation." Victor ticked off items like he was reading a contract. "You don't undermine me in front of my people. I don't dismiss you in front of yours. You bring me problems before they become crises. I give you the resources to solve them. You stand with me when it matters. I protect you from everything and everyone, including myself." Generous terms for a man who bought a wife. "I didn't buy you, Lena. I acquired your father's debt and accepted you as payment. The difference matters." Victor's eyes hardened fractionally. "Marcus sold you because he's a coward who'd rather sacrifice his daughter than face consequences. I accepted because I saw potential where he saw disposal. Don't confuse his failure with my intention." The words hit harder than Lena expected, because Victor was right. Her father had sold her, had looked her in the eye 5 weeks ago and told her she owed him this, owed him everything because he'd raised her alone, because she'd failed to save James, because her existence was a debt that could only be paid one way. And Lena, trained from childhood to swallow her own needs, had agreed. "I need to see him," she said suddenly. "My father, before I move my things." Victor studied her for a long moment. Why? Because I need to say goodbye. To the person I was, to the life I had, to the illusion that he ever cared about anything beyond his own survival. All right. Victor pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. Alexei will drive you. Take whatever time you need. But Lena? He waited until she met his eyes. Understand that once you walk out of Marcus Moreau's house as my wife, you can't go back. Whatever relationship you had with your father ends today. He made his choice. Now you make yours. The townhouse in Brooklyn Heights looked exactly the same. Brownstone facade, window boxes that hadn't held flowers in years. The same cracked step Lena had tripped over when she was 7. But everything felt different now, like she was viewing her childhood through glass. Alexei waited by the car, a silent presence in expensive wool and concealed weapons. 2 more men flanked the entrance. Victor's security was thorough, obvious, impossible to ignore. Marcus Moreau opened the door before Lena could knock. He looked older than she remembered. 3 weeks could do that, apparently, when you'd sold your daughter to save your own skin. His face was gray, hollow-eyed, the look of a man who hadn't slept well since making a deal with the devil. Lena. Her name came out rough. I didn't think you'd come. I'm here for my things, not for you. She pushed past him into the familiar hallway. Nothing had changed. Same peeling wallpaper, same scuffed floors, same smell of old books and older regrets. This was the house where she'd grown up, where her mother had died, where she'd brought James as a new bride and watched her father get drunk at their wedding. God, had she ever been that naive? Lena, please. Marcus followed her up the stairs to her old room. Let me explain. Explain what? Lena spun to face him on the landing. Explain how you gambled away $3 million? How you came to me with tears in your eyes and told me Victor Cade would kill you if you didn't pay? How you made me believe this was the only way to save your life? It wasn't. The words came out cold, final. Victor told me this morning you had options. He would have taken the gallery, your accounts, everything you own. You would have survived, broke, ruined, but alive. She stepped closer, watching him flinch. You chose me because it was easier, because sacrificing your daughter was simpler than sacrificing your pride. Marcus's face crumpled. You don't understand what it's like living with that kind of pressure. The threats, the fear. I understand perfectly. Lena's voice was ice. I married him, didn't I? I walked down that aisle and bound myself to a man I'd never met because you told me I owed you. That I owed you for being born, for surviving when Mother didn't, for existing as a constant reminder of everything you'd lost. Lena, that's not... Don't. She held up a hand. Don't lie. Not now. We're past that. She moved toward her bedroom door. I'm taking my things, my books, my mother's jewelry, the photos, everything else you can keep or burn. I don't care. Where will you go? The question was so absurd, Lena almost laughed. Where do you think? I'm Victor Cade's wife now. I live in his home, eat at his table, sleep under his protection. You made sure of that. She spent an hour packing. Books first. The poetry collections her mother had loved, the art history texts from her Columbia days, the first editions she'd collected over years of haunting estate sales. Then her mother's things, carefully wrapped, the pearl necklace, the gold watch, the wedding ring Marcus had never asked for back. Photographs came next, pulled from frames and albums, memories of a life that felt increasingly like fiction. When she came downstairs with the last box, Marcus was waiting in the living room, a glass of whiskey in his shaking hand. I'm sorry, he said. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Lena set down the box, looked at her father, really looked at him, maybe for the first time in years, saw the weakness there, the self-pity, the desperate need for absolution he'd never earn. It's worth nothing, she said quietly. Your apology, your regret, your tears, none of it changes what you did. None of it gives me back the choice you stole. He'll hurt you. Marcus's voice broke. Men like Victor Cade, they don't know how to be anything but dangerous. He'll break you, Lena, just like James? Lena finished. Like my husband who wrapped his car around a tree because he thought he could drive drunk without consequences? Like the man I loved who chose a bottle over me every single time. She shook her head. Victor might be dangerous, but at least he's honest about it. At least he tells me exactly what I'm walking into instead of dressing up control as love. She picked up her box, nodded to Alexei waiting by the door. Goodbye, Marcus. Don't call. Don't write. Don't come to Victor's home looking for money or mercy or forgiveness. As far as I'm concerned, you stopped being my father the day you sold me. Lena. But she was already walking out, leaving Marcus Moreau standing in his empty house with his whiskey and his guilt. And she didn't look back. Not once. Not even when she heard the sound of breaking glass and knew he'd thrown his drink at the wall. Some things, once broken, couldn't be fixed. Some doors, once closed, stayed that way. In the car, Alexei maintained professional silence as they loaded her boxes. But before he started the engine, he glanced at her in the rearview mirror. For what it's worth, Mrs. Cade, you handled that with more grace than most would. Most people didn't marry your boss to settle their father's debts. No, Alexei agreed. But most people who marry the boss don't walk down the aisle in black and live to tell about it. You've got steel in you. Mr. Cade saw that. So did everyone else at that wedding. The compliment, delivered in Alexei's flat Slavic accent, somehow meant more than it should. Lena found herself almost smiling. Does he scare you, Victor? Alexei's laugh was short, humorless. Every day. I've worked for him 6 years, and I still don't know what he'll do next. But here's the thing. He's fair. Brutal, yes. Unforgiving, absolutely. But fair. You follow his rules, he protects you. You break them, you pay the price. Simple as that. And what are his rules? Loyalty above everything. Honesty, even when it hurts. And never ever make him look weak in front of his enemies. Alexei met her eyes in the mirror again. You did all three yesterday when you stood up for yourself. That's why he kept you. Why he broke Nikolai's face for insulting you, because you didn't come to him weak and grateful. You came strong and defiant. And in Victor's world, strength is the only thing that matters. They drove back to Soho in silence after that, Lena turning Alexei's words over in her mind. Strength was the only thing that mattered. Maybe that was the key to surviving this, not trying to be softer, more compliant, more what a mob wife was supposed to be, but being exactly what she'd been in that cathedral, unbreakable. Victor was waiting when she returned, emerging from his office as Maria and the security team carried in her boxes. How did it go? As expected. Lena pulled off her coat. I told him goodbye. Took what was mine. Left everything else behind. Victor nodded slowly. And how do you feel? The question surprised her. She'd expected him to ask what was said, whether there'd been problems. Anything but this careful inquiry into her emotional state. Free, Lena said, and realized it was true. For the first time in 3 years, I feel free. Something flickered in Victor's expression. Approval, maybe, or satisfaction. Good. Maria will help you unpack. We leave for dinner at 8. Dress code is formal. What exactly happens at these dinners? Politics. Victor's smile was sharp. My captains report on their territories. We discuss problems, allocate resources, settle disputes. You'll sit beside me, observe, and if anyone asks you a direct question, answer honestly. They'll be testing you, seeing if you're a liability or an asset. And which am I? That depends entirely on you. The dinner was held in a private room at Constantine, a Russian restaurant in Brighton Beach that served as neutral territory for Brooklyn's various criminal enterprises. Lena dressed carefully, a black sheath dress that echoed her wedding choice but with enough elegance to suggest sophistication rather than rebellion. Diamonds at her ears, her mother's pearls at her throat, armor disguised as jewelry. Victor's approval was evident in the way his eyes lingered when she descended the stairs. Perfect, he said simply, and offered his arm. The restaurant was everything Lena had imagined and worse, all old-world opulence and new-world menace, where men in expensive suits concealed weapons and waiters served vodka like water. Victor's inner circle was already assembled, 8 men ranging from late 20s to early 60s, each radiating the particular confidence that came from knowing they could end a life without consequence. Alexei was there, of course, Victor's right hand. Beside him sat Dmitry Volkov, Alexei's cousin and head of their smuggling operations. Then Yuri Konstantin, who owned the restaurant and controlled most of Brighton Beach's protection rackets. Marcus Chen handled their money laundering through a network of legitimate businesses. Sergei Popov ran their drug distribution. Ivan Fedorov managed enforcement. And then Lena's breath caught. Nikolai Cade sat at the far end of the table, his face still bruised from Victor's backhand, murder in his eyes as they landed on Lena. "Everyone knows my wife," Victor said smoothly, his hand firm on Lena's waist as he guided her to the head of the table. "Let's begin." The meal was excruciating, not because of the food, which was excellent, but because of the undercurrents running through every conversation. The men tested her constantly, subtle questions designed to probe for weakness, ignorance, anything that would confirm she was dead weight Victor had foolishly acquired. "Mrs. Cade," Yuri Konstantin said midway through the second course, his accent thick but his English perfect. "Your father's gallery in Chelsea, will you be maintaining involvement there?" The question was a trap. If she said yes, they'd think she was clinging to her old life, unable to adapt. If she said no, they'd think she had nothing to contribute. "The gallery is my father's problem now," Lena answered carefully. "I have other interests." "Such as?" Lena met his gaze steadily. "Such as understanding my husband's business well enough to be useful rather than decorative. I assume that's why we're all here, so you can decide which category I fall into." Silence fell across the table. Then Dmitry Volkov laughed, a sound like gravel shifting. "She's got teeth, Victor, I'll give you that." "She does," Victor agreed, his hand finding Lena's under the table, squeezing once. A gesture of approval, or maybe warning. "Which is why she's here. Lena isn't a trophy, she's an investment, and I protect my investments." "Even when they wear black to their own wedding?" Nikolai's voice dripped with contempt. "Even when they disrespect our traditions?" Victor's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Careful, Nikolai. You already used your warning yesterday. I'd hate for you to waste your second chance so quickly." Nikolai's jaw clenched, but he subsided. For now. The rest of the dinner proceeded with agonizing slowness. Territories were discussed. Who controlled what blocks, which operations needed expansion, where competitors were encroaching. Money was allocated. Disputes were settled with Victor's final word carrying the weight of law. And through it all, Lena sat silent, watching, learning. She began to see the architecture of Victor's power, how he balanced his captains against each other, how he rewarded loyalty and punished failure, how he maintained control through a combination of fear and respect that kept everyone striving to earn his approval. It was fascinating, terrifying, absolutely ruthless. It was, she realized with a chill, exactly how Victor had described their marriage. As dessert was being served, Yuri turned to her again. "You're very quiet, Mrs. Cade. Observing?" "Learning," Lena corrected. "There's a difference." "And what have you learned?" Lena considered her answer carefully. This was a test too, maybe the most important one. She could play it safe, give some meaningless platitude about family and tradition, or she could be honest. She chose honesty. "I've learned that everyone at this table is afraid of my husband except Nikolai, who's too stupid to recognize danger when it's already broken his face. I've learned that Alexei is more than Victor's second. He's his conscience, the man who'll tell him no when everyone else says yes. I've learned that you, Mr. Konstantin, control more territory than anyone here except Victor himself, but you're content to let him lead because you're smart enough to know being in charge isn't worth the target it puts on your back." The silence this time was absolute. Every man at the table stared at her, some with shock, some with grudging respect, Nikolai with pure hatred. Yuri's laugh broke the tension. "Definitely got teeth. The question is, does she know when to use them?" "She's learning that too," Victor said quietly. His hand on Lena's knee tightened. Whether in warning or approval, she couldn't tell. The dinner ended shortly after, with handshakes and promises to reconvene next month. As the captains filtered out, Nikolai hung back, his bruised face twisted with something ugly. "This isn't over," he said. Too quiet for anyone but Lena and Victor to hear. "You humiliated me, both of you." "You humiliated yourself," Victor corrected. "I just made sure everyone saw it." Nikolai's hand moved toward his jacket. Victor moved faster, catching his wrist in a grip that made Nikolai gasp. Don't. Victor's voice was gentle, almost kind. Don't make me kill you in front of my wife on our second day of marriage. The paperwork would be terrible. He released Nikolai, who stumbled back, cradling his wrist. One day, Nikolai hissed. One day you'll slip, cousin. And when I do, you'll still be too much of a coward to capitalize on it. Victor straightened his cuffs. Now get out. You're embarrassing the family name. Nikolai left, trailing resentment like smoke. Lena waited until the door closed before turning to Victor. He's going to be a problem. He already is. Victor guided her toward the exit where their car waited. But he's a problem I've been managing his whole life. One more threat doesn't change anything. He looked at me like he wanted me dead. He does. Victor's honesty was brutal. Because you represent everything he hates. Change, strength in unexpected places, a shift in power he can't control. But wanting you dead and being able to do something about it are very different things. In the car, Lena found herself trembling. The adrenaline of the evening was wearing off, leaving exhaustion in its wake. You did well tonight, Victor said, surprising her. Better than I expected. I told your second in command he was your conscience and your biggest captain, that he was too smart to want your job. That was honest. And in my world, honesty is rarer than loyalty. Victor's eyes gleamed in the passing streetlights. You could have played it safe, said nothing, smiled and nodded like a good little wife. Instead, you showed them exactly what I saw when you walked down that aisle in black. Steel underneath the silk. Is that what you want? A wife with steel? I want a partner who won't break the first time things get hard, who won't fold when threatened, who can stand beside me and hold her own. Victor's hand found hers in the darkness. So yes, Lena, I want the steel. The question is whether you're ready to use it. Lena looked down at their joined hands, his scarred and dangerous, hers soft but no longer quite so delicate. 24 hours ago, she'd been someone else, someone who believed she could provoke her own end rather than surrender her freedom. Now she was beginning to understand that freedom and surrender weren't opposites, that sometimes strength came from choosing your battles rather than dying on every hill, that maybe, just maybe, being Victor Cade's wife didn't have to mean being his victim. I'm ready, she heard herself say. Teach me. Victor's smile in the darkness was sharp as a blade, bright as promise. Oh, Lena, he said softly, this is going to be fun. The training started the next morning at dawn. Lena woke to Victor's knock, sharp and insistent against her bedroom door. She'd fallen asleep in the guest room again, too exhausted from the previous night's dinner to navigate the complicated politics of where she should or shouldn't sleep. But when she opened the door, Victor was already dressed in dark athletic gear, his expression alert despite the early hour. Get dressed, he said without preamble. Comfortable clothes. You have 5 minutes. For what? Your education. Victor's smile was thin. You asked me to teach you. We start now. The basement of Victor's building had been converted into something between a gym and a tactical training facility. Mats covered the floor, weapons lined the walls in locked cases, and a shooting range occupied the far end. Alexei was already there, similarly dressed, his expression neutral as he watched Lena take in the space. Self-defense first, Victor announced. Can't protect yourself if you don't know how to fight. The next 2 hours were brutal. Victor didn't coddle, didn't ease her into it gently. He showed her how to break a hold, how to use an attacker's momentum against them, how to find vulnerable points on a body and exploit them without hesitation. Lena hit the mat more times than she could count, her body protesting every impact, but each time Victor pulled her back up. Again, he'd say, relentless, faster, harder, like you mean it. By the time he called a break, Lena was soaked in sweat, her muscles screaming, her pride somewhere on the floor with her dignity. But she'd also landed a strike that made Victor grunt in surprise, a knee to his solar plexus that had actually connected. Better, he said, approval coloring his tone. You're starting to understand that size doesn't matter as much as intent. A small woman who's willing to go for the eyes is more dangerous than a big man who hesitates. I'm not small, Lena muttered, accepting the water bottle Alexei offered. You're 5'6" and maybe 130 pounds soaking wet. Victor's assessment was clinical. In my world, that's small. But it doesn't have to be a weakness. He gestured toward the shooting range. Come on, time to learn the equalizer. Lena had never held a gun before. James had owned one, kept it locked in a safe that she'd never opened, but the thought of using it had always seemed foreign, impossible. Now Victor placed a compact Glock in her hands like he was giving her a gift. This is a 43X, he explained, standing behind her, adjusting her grip. 9mm, holds 10 rounds, perfect for concealed carry. Light enough that you won't tire, powerful enough to stop a threat. His body was warm against her back, his hands guiding hers into position. Lena tried to focus on the instruction, not on the strange intimacy of the moment. This man teaching her to kill while standing closer than he'd been since their wedding kiss. Stance is everything, Victor continued. Feet shoulder-width apart, weight forward, arms extended. You're not trying to kill the target, you're trying to stop the threat. Center mass, 2 shots, reassess. The first trigger pull surprised her, the recoil, the noise even through the ear protection, the way the bullet punched through the paper target 15 yards away, completely missed the silhouette. Don't anticipate. Victor's breath was warm against her ear. Let the shot surprise you. Squeeze, don't pull. By the 30th round, Lena was starting to understand. By the 50th, she'd hit the target's chest 3 times. By the time Victor finally called it, her arms were shaking from fatigue, but she'd managed a grouping that made Alexei raise his eyebrows. Natural talent, he observed. Or stubbornness. Hard to tell which. Both, Lena said, setting down the weapon with hands that trembled slightly. The power of it still thrummed through her, the knowledge that she could, if necessary, defend herself, that she wasn't helpless anymore. Victor checked his watch. Shower, breakfast. Then we discuss the business side of your education. The business side, as it turned out, meant sitting in Victor's office while he walked her through the architecture of his empire. Not the violence, not the crimes themselves, but the infrastructure that supported it all. The legitimate businesses that laundered money. The shell corporations that owned property. The network of lawyers, accountants, and politicians who kept the whole operation running smoothly. Knowledge is power, Victor explained, pulling up spreadsheets on his computer. I don't expect you to run operations, but I do expect you to understand how money flows, where our vulnerabilities are, who owes us, and who we owe. Because if something happens to me, you need to know enough to protect yourself. If something happens to you? Lena caught the phrasing. You mean when someone tries to kill you. When? Victor agreed without hesitation. Not if. I've survived 3 attempts in the last 2 years. There'll be more. It's the nature of what I do. Someone's always looking to take what's mine. That's insane. That's reality. Victor leaned back in his chair, studying her. You're part of this now, Lena, which means you're a target too. Not as big a target as me, but still valuable to anyone who wants leverage. That's why you learn to fight, why you learn to shoot, why you need to understand the business well enough to know when someone's lying to you. The weight of it settled over Lena like a shroud. She'd known, intellectually, that marrying Victor meant entering a dangerous world. But hearing him lay it out so clinically, acknowledging that people would try to hurt her just to get to him, made it terrifyingly real. Has anyone threatened me yet? Not directly, but Nikolai's been making noise to his associates. Nothing concrete, just suggestions that you're a weakness I can't afford, that bringing an outsider into the family was a mistake. Lena's hands clenched. What are you going to do about it? Nothing. Victor's answer surprised her. Yet. Nikolai is family, which means he gets more rope than most. But he's also predictable. When he finally oversteps, and he will, I'll be ready. And me? What am I supposed to do? Just wait for him to try something? You're supposed to be smart. Stay alert. Don't go anywhere without your security detail. Trust your instincts. Victor's expression hardened. And if he does try something, you put 2 in his chest and 1 in his head, exactly like I taught you this morning. The casual way he said it, like killing his own cousin was just another item on a checklist, sent a chill through Lena. This was the man she'd married, someone who could order a death, carry one out, and sleep soundly afterward because it was just business, just survival. I don't know if I can do that, Lena admitted quietly. Kill someone. You can. Victor's certainty was absolute. When it's you or them, when it's survival or surrender, you'll do what's necessary. Everyone does. The question is whether you'll hesitate first. Over the next week, a routine emerged. Mornings meant physical training with Victor and Alexei, self-defense, weapons handling, tactical awareness. Afternoons were spent in Victor's office, learning the labyrinthine structures of his organization. Evenings varied between quiet dinners at the penthouse and carefully orchestrated public appearances designed to cement Lena's position as Victor's wife and partner. She was getting stronger, not just physically, though the training was building muscle and confidence she'd never had, but mentally, strategically. She was learning to read the power dynamics in Victor's world, to identify threats and opportunities, to understand the unspoken rules that governed every interaction. And somewhere in the process, something shifted between her and Victor. It started small. His hand at the small of her back lasting a fraction longer than necessary. The way his eyes tracked her across a room, no longer assessing but appreciating. Conversations that stretched late into the night, moving from business to philosophy to the careful revelation of vulnerabilities neither of them typically showed. "Why did you really choose me?" Lena asked one night, curled into the corner of his office sofa while Victor worked through paperwork. "You could have refused my father's offer, could have taken everything he owned and left it at that." Victor didn't look up from the contract he was reviewing. "I told you, I saw potential." "That's not an answer. That's a deflection." This time he did look up, amusement glinting in his winter eyes. "You're getting better at reading me. That's dangerous." "Victor." He set down his pen, gave her his full attention. "You want the truth? The real reason?" "Yes." "Because you reminded me of someone I used to be." Victor's voice went quiet, reflective in a way she'd never heard. "Before this life, before the empire, I was a kid from Brighton Beach who watched his father get beaten to death over a gambling debt. I was 15, powerless. I had to stand there and watch because if I'd intervened, they'd have killed me too." Lena's breath caught. Victor never talked about his past, never revealed anything personal beyond what was necessary for their partnership. "After my father died," Victor continued, "I had two choices. I could stay weak and let the world grind me into nothing, or I could become strong enough that no one would ever have that kind of power over me again. I chose strength, built it from nothing, step by step, until I became the thing I'd feared most. And you saw that in me? That same choice? I saw a woman standing at a crossroads. You'd lost your husband, been failed by your father, sold like livestock to settle debts. You could have broken, could have accepted that you were a victim and let it define you forever." Victor's gaze was intense, pinning her in place. "But when I had you investigated, I saw the gallery accounts, saw how you'd been quietly moving money into a private account for 6 months, saw the passport application you'd started but never finished. You were planning to run." The observation hit like a physical blow. Lena had thought those preparations were secret, careful. She'd underestimated Victor's thoroughness. "Why didn't you?" Victor asked. "You had enough saved. You could have disappeared." "I don't know," Lena admitted. "Part of me wanted to, but another part knew that running wouldn't solve anything. My father would still owe the debt. Someone else would pay the price, and I'd spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering when it would catch up to me. So you chose to face it instead, to walk into that cathedral wearing black and dare me to destroy you." Victor's smile was sharp. "That's why I chose you, Lena, because you're a survivor. And survivors understand that sometimes the only way out is through." The conversation stayed with Lena long after she'd retreated to her room. She was still in the guest bedroom, still maintaining that careful distance, but the space between them was shrinking. Every day brought new intimacies, his hand brushing hers during dinner, the way he listened when she spoke like her words actually mattered, the rare smiles that transformed his face from brutally handsome to something approaching beautiful. She was starting to care about Victor Cade, and that terrified her more than any of his enemies ever could. The package arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered with the regular mail like it was something normal. Maria brought it to Lena while she was having coffee, a small box wrapped in brown paper with no return address. "This came for you, Mrs. Cade." Lena took it, frowning. She hadn't ordered anything, didn't know anyone who'd send her gifts at this address. The weight was wrong too light, like the box was mostly empty. Wait, Victor's voice cut across the room. He'd emerged from his office, his expression sharp. Don't open that. But Lena had already started pulling at the paper. The box underneath was plain cardboard, unmarked. She lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a dead dove. Its white feathers were matted with blood, its neck broken at an unnatural angle, and pinned to its chest was a single bullet with her name scratched into the casing. Lena dropped the box. The dove tumbled out, hitting the floor with a soft thud that seemed obscenely loud in the sudden silence. Alexei, Victor's voice was deadly calm. Lock down the building. No one in or out until we trace this package. Maria, take Mrs. Cade to the safe room. I'm not going anywhere. Lena's voice surprised her, steady despite the nausea churning in her stomach. Someone just threatened my life. I want to know who. Victor crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands framing her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Lena, safe room. Now. This isn't negotiable. The hell it isn't? She pulled away from his grip. You told me I needed to be strong, that I needed to face threats instead of hiding from them. Well, here's a threat. So what do we do about it? For a moment, Victor just stared at her. Then something shifted in his expression, surprise giving way to a fierce kind of pride. All right, he said softly. Then we handle it together. The next hour was a masterclass in controlled fury. Victor had the package analyzed, the delivery traced, every piece of evidence cataloged and cross-referenced. The dove had been killed recently, within the last 12 hours. The bullet was a 9mm, common, but the scratching on the casing was distinctive, deep gouges that suggested someone with more rage than skill. Nikolai, Alexei announced, his voice flat. Has to be. He's been escalating, making threats. This is his style, dramatic, personal, designed to terrorize rather than kill. It worked, Lena muttered, trying to stop her hands from shaking. The image of that broken dove was burned into her retinas, the message clear as daylight. You're next. Victor's hand found her shoulder, squeezed once. It didn't work. You're still here, still standing. He wanted to scare you into running, into proving you're weak. Instead, you're asking me how to fight back. So how do we fight back? We make him understand what happens when you threaten what's mine. Victor's voice went cold, calculated. Alexei, bring Nikolai here. I don't care what he's doing. I don't care if he resists. Bring him to me in the next 2 hours. Victor, Alexei's tone held a warning. He's family. If you move against him without proof, the others will fall in line or join him. Victor's eyes blazed. Someone sent my wife a death threat, delivered it to our home. That crosses every line we have. Family or not, Nikolai answers for this. Alexei left. Victor turned to Lena, his expression softening fractionally. You don't have to be here when he arrives. This is going to get ugly. I'm staying, Lena's jaw set. He threatened me. I want to see his face when he realizes it didn't work. It's going to be violent, Lena, bloody, not something you need to witness. You're wrong. Lena met his gaze steadily. It's exactly what I need to witness. Because if I hide now, if I let you fight my battles while I cower in a safe room, then everyone in your organization will know I'm weak. And weakness, as you've told me repeatedly, is the only unforgivable sin. Victor studied her for a long moment. Then slowly, he smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the expression of a predator who'd just found a worthy hunting partner. All right, he said, but if it gets to be too much, you leave. No shame in that. There's a difference between strength and stupidity. Nikolai arrived 90 minutes later, dragged in by Alexei and 2 other security men. His face was already bruised. He'd resisted, clearly, and his eyes were wild with anger and fear as he was forced into a chair in Victor's office. What the hell is this? Nikolai spat. You can't just kidnap me, Victor. I'm your cousin. Your blood. My blood, Victor interrupted, his voice soft and deadly, doesn't send death threats to my wife. Nikolai's face went pale. I don't know what you're... Don't lie to me. Victor moved with casual grace to his desk, picked up the evidence bag containing the bullet. Lena Cade. Scratched into the casing with something sharp. Amateur work, really. You couldn't even do a proper death threat without making it traceable. That's not mine. I never... The delivery was made from a service you've used before. The dove was purchased from a pet shop 3 blocks from your apartment, and the scratching on this bullet matches the pattern on the knife we confiscated from you last month when you got drunk and tried to start a fight with Dmitri. Victor set down the bag. Want to try again? Nikolai's bravado crumbled. She deserved it. Walking around like she owns the place, like she's one of us when she's just some whore you married to. The blow came so fast Lena barely saw it. Victor's fist connected with Nikolai's jaw with a crack that echoed through the office. Nikolai's chair tipped backward, sending him sprawling across the floor, blood pouring from his split lip. I warned you. Victor's voice was conversational, almost pleasant. Twice now, I've warned you about disrespecting my wife. But you didn't listen. You sent her a dead dove and a bullet with her name on it. You threatened to kill the woman I've claimed as mine. Victor, please! Nikolai scrambled backward, his eyes wide with terror. You made this personal, Nikolai. You crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. Victor pulled a gun from his desk drawer, checked the chamber with practiced ease. So now you have 2 choices. You can leave New York tonight. Disappear. Start over somewhere I'll never have to see your face again. Or... He pointed the gun at Nikolai's head. Or you can refuse, and I'll put a bullet through your skull right here, right now, and dump your body in the Hudson like the trash you've become. You wouldn't, Nikolai gasped. Family, Victor. We're family. You stopped being family when you threatened Lena. Victor's hand was perfectly steady, his aim unwavering. 5 seconds. Choose. Wait, Nikolai's voice broke. Wait, please. I'll go. I'll leave tonight. You'll never see me again, I swear. 3 seconds. I'm sorry. Nikolai was crying now, tears mixing with blood on his face. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Please don't kill me. Victor lowered the gun. Alexei, put him on a plane to Moscow. Our associates there will make sure he stays far away from New York. If he comes back, if he contacts anyone in this organization, if he so much as speaks my name, he dies. Alexei finished. Understood. They dragged Nikolai out, still pleading, still crying. The office door closed behind them, leaving Victor and Lena alone in the sudden silence. Lena realized she was shaking, not from fear, not exactly, but from the sheer intensity of what she'd just witnessed. Victor hadn't killed Nikolai, but he'd come close, and he'd done it for her, to protect her, to send a message that threatening his wife came with consequences that family connections couldn't erase. Are you all right? Victor's voice was gentle now, all the violence carefully contained again. I don't know. Lena's laugh was shaky. I think I should be horrified, should be running for the door, but instead I'm just relieved that he's gone, that I won't have to watch my back around him anymore. That's survival instinct. Victor set down the gun, moved to where Lena stood frozen by the window. Your body knows what your mind is still processing, that in this world, mercy is often more dangerous than ruthlessness. I could have let Nikolai stay, accepted his apology, given him another chance. But then every other person thinking about coming after you would see that threats work, that I'll fold if pushed hard enough. So you exiled him instead, made an example. I protected you. There's a difference. Victor's hand came up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Lena, I meant what I said in those vows. No one touches you without answering to me. No one hurts you. No one threatens you. That's not negotiable. That's not political. That's absolute. The tenderness in his voice, the fierce protectiveness behind the words, broke something loose in Lena's chest. This man, this brutal, dangerous, absolutely ruthless man, had just banished his own cousin for threatening her, had held a gun to family and chosen her instead. Why? The question came out as a whisper. Why does it matter so much to you? I'm just a woman you're required to settle a debt. No. Victor's hand moved to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. You stopped being that the moment you walked down that aisle in black. You became something else. Something I didn't expect and can't quite define. But it matters, Lena. You matter. And I protect what matters to me. They stood there, inches apart, the air between them charged with something electric and inevitable. Lena could feel her pulse hammering, could see the way Victor's eyes had darkened, the careful control starting to slip. "Victor," she breathed. He kissed her. Not like at the wedding, not for show, not to make a point. This was different. Honest. His mouth on hers was demanding but not cruel, taking but also giving, asking a question she found herself answering before she could think better of it. Lena's hands came up to grip his shoulders, pulling him closer instead of pushing away. And Victor responded, one arm sliding around her waist, the other hand tangling in her hair, holding her exactly where he wanted her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victor's expression was fierce and satisfied. "I'm not going to apologize for that," he said. "Good." Lena's voice was steadier than she felt. "Because I'm not going to pretend I didn't want it. This changes things." "I know." Victor's smile was sharp. "Your room or mine?" Lena took a breath. This was it. The line she'd been avoiding since their wedding night. Once crossed, there was no going back. She'd be his wife in truth, not just on paper. She'd be choosing this life, this man, this dangerous partnership that kept blurring into something that felt dangerously close to real. "Yours," she said, and watched something flash in Victor's eyes that looked like triumph and relief mixed together. He took her hand, led her upstairs to the master bedroom she'd never entered. The space was exactly what she'd expected. Masculine, minimalist, dominated by a massive bed that suddenly seemed impossibly intimate. "We don't have to," Victor started, but Lena cut him off. "Yes, we do. Because if we don't, if we keep pretending this is just business, we're lying to ourselves." She turned to face him fully. "I'm not in love with you, Victor. I'm not going to pretend I am, but I trust you, and I want this. So unless you've changed your mind..." He kissed her again, answering without words. And this time when they broke apart, Victor's hands went to the buttons of her shirt, his movements careful but deliberate, giving her every chance to stop him. Lena didn't stop him. Instead, she helped, shrugging out of her clothes with a boldness that surprised her, meeting his gaze steadily even as vulnerability threatened to overwhelm her. This was trust. This was partnership. This was choosing Victor Cade not because she had to, but because she wanted to. And when he finally pulled her down to the bed, when his hands traced patterns on her skin that made her gasp, when he whispered her name like a prayer and a promise combined, Lena realized something fundamental had shifted. She wasn't Victor's captive anymore. She wasn't his victim or his possession or his trophy. She was his partner, his equal, his wife in every sense of the word. And that changed everything. The morning after brought a shift in the penthouse's atmosphere that even Maria noticed. Lena came down to breakfast wearing one of Victor's shirts, her hair still damp from the shower, and found him already at the table with his coffee and newspaper. When she entered, he looked up, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the line they'd crossed, the territory they'd claimed together in the darkness. "Good morning," Victor said, and the simple words carried layers of meaning. "Morning." Lena poured herself coffee, settled into the chair beside him instead of across. The proximity felt natural now, earned rather than forced. They were halfway through breakfast when Alexei arrived, his expression grim. "We have a problem," he announced without preamble. "Mikhail Petrov requested a meeting, tonight. Says it's urgent." Victor's jaw tightened. "Mikhail doesn't do urgent unless he's planning something. What's his angle?" "He claims it's about territory disputes in Red Hook. Says the truce we established last year is breaking down, needs to be renegotiated before things get bloody." Alexei's tone suggested he didn't believe it for a second. "It's a power play," Lena said, surprising both men. When they looked at her, she continued, "He heard about Nikolai. Probably thinks you're weak now, that exiling family means you're losing control. He's testing you." Victor's eyes gleamed with approval. "Exactly right. Mikhail's been looking for an opening for months. He thinks Nikolai's exile makes me vulnerable." "So what do we do?" Lena asked. "Refuse the meeting?" "No, we go. We show him that removing Nikolai wasn't weakness. It was house cleaning. and we make sure he understands that any attempt to exploit the situation will end badly for him. Victor's attention shifted to Alexei. Tell Petrov we'll meet him at Konstantin's, neutral ground, 8 o'clock. And make sure everyone understands this is a diplomatic dinner, not a war council. After Alexei left, Lena turned to Victor. You're bringing me, aren't you? Yes. Mikhail will expect to see you, to gauge whether you're an asset or a liability. It's another test. I'm getting tired of tests. Victor's smile was sharp. Then pass this one so decisively, they stop testing you altogether. The preparation for dinner was meticulous. Lena dressed in emerald silk, a color that made her eyes fierce and her presence unmistakable. Diamonds glittered at her throat. Victor's gift from that morning, delivered with a kiss that had almost made them late. She looked like power wrapped in elegance, exactly the image they needed to project. In the car, Victor briefed her on Mikhail Petrov. Late 40s, second-generation Russian mob, controlled most of the weapons trafficking in Brooklyn and had ambitions toward Manhattan. Smart, ruthless, and currently looking for any weakness in Victor's organization he could exploit. He'll try to bait you, Victor warned. Say things designed to make you react emotionally. Don't give him the satisfaction. Stay calm, stay sharp, and remember, you're my wife. That means you carry my authority. Use it. Konstantin's was already buzzing with tension when they arrived. Yuri greeted them personally, his face carefully neutral, and escorted them to the private dining room where Mikhail waited. Mikhail Petrov was everything Lena had imagined and worse. He sat at the head of the table like he owned it, flanked by 2 enormous bodyguards, his silver hair slicked back and his suit custom-tailored to emphasize broad shoulders. When Victor and Lena entered, his eyes tracked over her with an assessment that made her skin crawl. Victor, Mikhail's English was heavily accented but perfect. And this must be the famous bride I've heard so much about. The one who wore black to her own wedding. Lena Cade, Victor introduced smoothly, his hand possessive on her waist. My wife. Charming. Mikhail's smile didn't reach his eyes. Please sit. We have much to discuss. The dinner started with false pleasantries, both men trading careful observations about business, territory, the state of their respective operations. Lena sat silent, watching the verbal chess match unfold, noting how Mikhail kept circling back to the same topic, Nikolai's exile. Family is important in our world, Mikhail observed, swirling wine in his glass. Blood ties, loyalty, tradition. When family turns against family, it creates uncertainty, makes allies wonder if they're next. Nikolai wasn't family. Victor's voice was flat. He was a liability pretending to be blood. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I sit, you exiled your cousin, your flesh and blood, over a woman you've known for what, 3 weeks? Mikhail's eyes cut to Lena. Cut. That seems extreme, even for you. Not extreme, Lena said before Victor could respond. Appropriate. Both men turned to her, surprise flickering across Mikhail's face. Victor's expression remained neutral, but she felt his approval in the slight pressure of his hand against her back. Appropriate? Mikhail repeated. Please, Mrs. Cade, enlighten me. Nikolai threatened my life. Lena met his gaze steadily. Sent me a dead dove and a bullet with my name on it. That's not a family disagreement or a difference of opinion. That's a declaration of war. Victor responded proportionally, exile instead of execution. Nikolai should be grateful he's still breathing. So you approve of your husband's decision, of him choosing you over his own blood? I approve of him establishing clear boundaries. Nikolai crossed them. He paid the price. The message is simple. Threaten what belongs to Victor Cade, suffer the consequences. Family connections don't grant immunity from stupidity. Mikhail's laugh was sharp, surprised. You have fire. I like that. But tell me, Mrs. Cade, do you really think you belong in this world? You're not one of us. You're not Russian, not raised in the life. You're an outsider playing dress-up in designer clothes. You're right, Lena agreed calmly. I'm not Russian. I wasn't raised in the life. But I'm a fast learner, and I have something you don't. My husband's complete trust. Which means when I speak with his authority. When I act with his backing. That makes me more dangerous than half the people at your table, Mr. Petrov, and we both know it. The room went silent. Mikhail's bodyguard shifted, hands moving toward weapons. Victor's posture remained relaxed, but Lena could feel the coiled tension in him, ready to explode into violence if needed. Then Mikhail laughed again, this time with genuine amusement. "She's good, Victor. Better than I expected. You chose well." "I know." Victor's tone didn't soften. "Now, let's discuss the real reason you called this meeting. It's not about Red Hook. It's not about Nikolai. What do you want, Mikhail?" The Russian's expression shifted, calculation replacing amusement. "Direct? I appreciate that. Fine. I want to renegotiate our arrangement for the ports. Your people control 70% of the shipping container traffic. I want 40%. You have 25%. That's generous considering your actual contributions to operations. My contributions keep the longshoremen's union from striking, keep customs inspectors looking the other way, keep your shipments moving smoothly through channels that would otherwise be very difficult." Mikhail leaned forward. "I want recognition for that value. 40%, or I start making things complicated." It was a threat, barely disguised. Lena watched Victor's face, saw the muscle tick in his jaw that meant he was calculating options, weighing responses. 30%, Lena said before Victor could answer. "You get 30%, and in exchange you publicly acknowledge that Victor's organization runs the ports. No more of this subtle positioning with the other families, no more suggesting you're equal partners. He's in charge, you're a well-compensated lieutenant. That's the deal." Mikhail's eyes narrowed. "You presume to negotiate for your husband?" "I presume to solve problems efficiently." Lena kept her voice level. "You want more money, you'll get it. Victor wants clear hierarchies and no more political maneuvering. He'll get that. Everybody wins." "And if I refuse?" "Then Victor gives you nothing, makes your operations difficult until you remember why you accepted 25% in the first place, and we all waste time and resources on a pissing contest that benefits no one." Lena met his gaze without flinching. "Or you can accept 30%, make 15% more than you're making now, and focus your energy on actual growth instead of pointless power plays. Your choice, Mr. Petrov." The silence stretched. Mikhail looked at Victor, clearly expecting him to override his wife's presumption. But Victor just smiled, cold and sharp. "What she said." Another pause. This one waited with decision. Then Mikhail nodded slowly. 30%. Public acknowledgement of hierarchy. But I want it in writing, Victor. Proper contracts, legal documentation. No more handshake deals that can be reinterpreted. Done. Alexei will have the paperwork ready by end of week. Victor stood, offering his hand. "Pleasure doing business with you, Mikhail." The handshake was brief, professional. But as they were leaving, Mikhail caught Lena's arm, his grip firm but not threatening. "You're either very brave or very stupid, Mrs. Cade. I haven't decided which." "Does it matter?" Lena extracted her arm gently. "Either way, the result is the same. You got your raise, Victor maintained his authority, and everyone goes home happy. Sometimes the why doesn't matter as much as the what." Mikhail's laugh followed them out into the cold November air. In the car, Victor was silent for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he pulled Lena against him, kissing her hard enough to bruise. "That," he said when they broke apart, "was extraordinary. I overstepped." Lena's heart was still racing from the confrontation. "I should have let you handle it, should have stayed quiet like a good little wife. If you ever become a good little wife, I'll know someone's replaced you with a pod person." Victor's eyes blazed with fierce pride. "You read the situation perfectly. Saw that Mikhail wanted to save face more than he wanted actual power. Gave him a win that cost us nothing and got us exactly what we needed, clear hierarchy and his public support. You're not angry?" "Angry? Lena, I'm impressed. You just handled a negotiation with one of Brooklyn's most dangerous men and came out ahead. You proved exactly what I told Mikhail, that you carry my authority, that you're not decoration or weakness. You're an asset." The praise shouldn't have warmed her as much as it did, but Lena found herself smiling despite the lingering adrenaline, despite the knowledge that she'd just gambled with forces that could have destroyed her if she'd miscalculated. "I'm learning," she said simply. Yes. Victor's hand found hers, threaded their fingers together. You are. Faster than I expected. It's terrifying and impressive in equal measure. They made love again that night, but it was different from before. Less about claiming, more about celebrating. Victor was tender in ways Lena hadn't known he could be. His hands gentle as they traced her skin, his mouth soft against hers. And afterward, lying tangled in expensive sheets with Manhattan glittering beyond the windows, Lena felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't just survival anymore. This wasn't just partnership or strategy or making the best of a bad situation. She was falling for Victor Cade. Actually, genuinely falling for the man who'd bought her like property and turned her into a queen. The realization terrified her more than any death threat could. The next morning brought complications. Lena was reviewing financial reports in Victor's office. She'd taken to helping with the legitimate business operations, using her art history degree to advise on money laundering through gallery sales, when Maria knocked. Mrs. Cade, there's a woman here to see you. She says her name is Rebecca Moreau, claims to be your cousin. Lena's blood went cold. Rebecca, her father's niece, the only family member who'd stayed in contact after James died. But what was she doing here? Show her in, Lena said, already bracing for disaster. Rebecca looked the same, early 30s, professionally dressed, kind eyes that had always seen too much. She took in Victor's office with obvious nervousness before settling on Lena. I'm sorry to barge in like this, Rebecca started, but I've been trying to call you for days. Your father said you changed your number, that you weren't taking visitors. I've been busy, Lena interrupted. What do you want, Rebecca? I want to make sure you're okay. Lena, everyone in the family knows what happened, how Uncle Marcus sold you to Victor Cade to settle his debts, how you had no choice. Rebecca's voice dropped. I want to help you get out. I have money saved, a lawyer friend who specializes in these situations. We can get you away from here, get you safe. I am safe. Lena kept her voice level. Safer than I've ever been, actually. Rebecca's expression crumpled into confusion. But he bought you. He forced you into this marriage. No one forced me to do anything. The lie came easily now, polished by repetition. I made a choice. My father owed a debt. I settled it. In return, I got protection, resources, and a partnership with someone who actually values what I bring to the table. Partnership? Rebecca's voice rose. Lena, he's a criminal, a murderer. The things Victor Cade has done are none of your business, Victor's voice cut through the conversation. He'd entered silently, his expression unreadable as he took in the scene. And neither is my marriage. Rebecca paled but stood her ground. I'm not leaving without knowing Lena wants this, without hearing her say it herself. Then ask her. Victor moved to stand behind Lena's chair, his hand resting possessively on her shoulder. Ask my wife if she wants to leave. If she's here against her will, ask her, Rebecca. I won't interfere. The challenge hung in the air. Lena could feel Rebecca's desperate hope, her genuine concern. Could see the escape route being offered, the chance to walk away from this life, this man, this dangerous partnership that was slowly consuming her. She could say yes, could leave with Rebecca, start over somewhere safe and anonymous. Victor had given his word not to interfere. She'd be free. But freedom, Lena had learned, was more complicated than just the absence of chains. I don't want to leave, she said clearly. Victor is my husband. This is my home. I chose this, Rebecca. I continue to choose it every day. You're brainwashed, Rebecca whispered. He's done something to you, made you think. He's made me think clearly for the first time in years. Lena stood, moved out from under Victor's hand to face her cousin directly. I spent 3 years after James died sleepwalking through life, working a job I hated, living with a father who resented my existence, pretending I was fine when I was slowly dying inside. Then this happened. And yes, it started as a transaction, but it became something else, something better than what I had before. Better? How can you call this better? Because I matter here. Because Victor sees me as an equal, not as a burden or a disappointment or a broken thing that needs fixing. Because when someone threatened my life, he exiled his own cousin to protect me. Because he's teaching me to be strong instead of expecting me to stay weak. Lena's voice strengthened. So yes, Rebecca, this is better. And I'm not leaving. Rebecca looked between them, her face a study in disbelief and heartbreak. If you change your mind, I won't. Lena's finality was absolute. But thank you for caring enough to try. After Rebecca left, escorted out by security, Lena sagged against Victor's desk. The adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. You could have gone, Victor observed quietly. I meant what I said. I wouldn't have stopped you. I know. Lena turned to face him. That's why I stayed. Because you gave me the choice. You always give me the choice, even when we both know what I'll pick. And what will you pick? Today? Tomorrow? A year from now? You. The admission felt like jumping off a cliff. I'll pick you, Victor. I don't know when it happened, don't know when this stopped being survival and became something real. But it did. And I'm terrified and exhilarated and completely out of my depth. But I'm choosing you anyway. Victor crossed to her in 2 strides, pulled her into his arms with a fierceness that spoke of relief and possession combined. Good, he said against her hair, because I chose you the moment you walked down that aisle in black and looked me in the eye without flinching. Everything else, the vows, the partnership, the protection, that was just me trying to keep what I'd already claimed. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other, the city sprawling beneath them in all its dangerous, glittering glory. And for the first time since her wedding day, Lena felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The piece lasted exactly 48 hours. Lena was leaving a gallery in Chelsea. She'd started consulting for several legitimate art dealers, using Victor's connections to build a reputation separate from her father's tainted legacy, when the attack came. One moment she was walking toward the car where Alexei waited, the next someone grabbed her from behind, a hand clamping over her mouth, an arm like steel around her waist. Her training kicked in before conscious thought. Lena drove her elbow back hard, felt it connect with ribs. The grip loosened fractionally. She stomped down on her attacker's instep, twisted sideways, broke free just enough to see Alexei drawing his weapon. Then everything exploded into chaos. The man holding her had backup, 3 more appearing from a black van, all armed, all moving with military precision. Alexei took down the first one, his shot clean and professional. But the second got a round off that shattered the car window, and the third was already moving toward Lena. She ran. Not away from the fight, Victor had taught her better than that, but toward the gallery entrance where security cameras would capture everything and witnesses would complicate the attack. Her heels slowed her down, and she could hear footsteps gaining behind her. The tackle came hard, sending her sprawling across concrete. Her palms scraped bloody, her dress tore, and then there was a gun pressed against her temple. "Don't move, Mrs. Cade," a voice hissed in accented English, "or I paint the sidewalk with your brain." Lena froze. This was it. The moment Victor had warned her about, the inevitable consequence of marrying into his world. Someone had finally decided she was valuable enough to take, expendable enough to risk Victor's wrath. She was going to die on a Chelsea sidewalk, and Victor would never forgive himself. Then Alexei's voice cut through the moment, cold and absolute. "Let her go, or I drop you where you stand. You're outnumbered, old man. 3 guns on you, 1 on her. Math doesn't work in your favor." "Doesn't need to." Alexei's aim never wavered. "Because while you're focused on me, you miss the 6 men who just surrounded this block. Victor doesn't send his wife out with 1 guard. He sends her out with a small army that stays invisible until needed. You're dead already. You just don't know it yet." As if summoned by his words, figures appeared from doorways, from cars, from the gathering crowd. Victor's people, all armed, all trained, all focused on the men holding Lena hostage. The math had changed. Suddenly, dramatically. "Let her go," Alexei repeated. "Walk away. Tell whoever sent you that this was a mistake. Maybe you live to regret it." The gun against Lena's temple trembled. She could feel her attacker's indecision, his calculation of odds that had shifted catastrophically against him. Then Victor's voice cut through the standoff, sharp as broken glass. "Or don't. Keep holding a gun to my wife's head. See what happens when you make this personal." He'd appeared like a ghost, emerging from a black SUV that had pulled up silently during the confrontation, and the look on his face, cold fury barely contained, made even Lena's blood run cold. The man holding her made his choice. The gun dropped away. He released Lena, hands rising in surrender. "Smart," Victor said softly. "Now tell me who sent you before I kill you anyway." "I don't—" The shot was precise, surgical. Victor put a bullet through the man's kneecap, dropping him screaming to the pavement. "Wrong answer. Try again." "Petrov." The man gasped through his pain. "Mikhail Petrov. He said to grab her, use her as leverage for better terms." He didn't finish. Victor's second shot was final, permanent. The body crumpled. "Alexei." Victor's voice remained eerily calm. "Clean this up, make it disappear, then send a message to Mikhail. Tell him I'm coming for a conversation, tonight." Then he was moving to Lena, his hands careful as they checked her for injuries, his eyes blazing with something that went beyond anger into territory she couldn't name. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. Scraped palms, torn dress, bruised ego. Nothing serious." "Nothing serious," Victor repeated flatly. "They put a gun to your head, Lena. They tried to take you from me." "But they didn't." Lena's hands came up to frame his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Because you taught me to fight. Because Alexei was there. Because you planned for everything, even things that shouldn't be possible. I'm fine, Victor. I'm here." He pulled her against him then, heedless of the watching crowd, the cleanup crew already working, the blood on the pavement, held her like she was something precious he'd almost lost. "I'm going to kill him," Victor said quietly. "Mikhail knew the rules. Knew that you were untouchable. He tried anyway. He dies for it." "Then I'm coming with you." Lena pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "He tried to use me as leverage. I want him to see that it didn't work. That I'm still here, still standing, still yours." Victor's smile was terrible and beautiful. "All right," he said. "Let's go remind Mikhail Petrov why you don't touch a Cade." The confrontation happened in the same private room at Konstantin's where Lena had first negotiated with Mikhail Petrov. But this time, the atmosphere was different. This time it wasn't diplomacy. It was war. Mikhail was already there when they arrived, flanked by his bodyguards, his face carefully composed into an expression of innocence that fooled no one. He stood when Victor and Lena entered, his eyes tracking the torn dress, the bandaged palms, the evidence of violence written across Lena's appearance. "Victor," Mikhail started, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I heard about the incident. Terrible business. I assure you I had nothing to—" Victor shot him. Not fatally. The bullet took Mikhail in the shoulder, spinning him backward into his chair with a cry of pain and shock. The bodyguards reached for their weapons, but Alexei and the 6 men who'd accompanied them were faster. Suddenly, the room was full of drawn guns, all pointed at Mikhail's people. "Sit down," Victor's voice was conversational, almost pleasant. "Put your hands where I can see them. Anyone moves, anyone even breathes wrong, and I'll paint these walls with Mikhail's brain before your bodies hit the floor." The bodyguards sat. Slowly, carefully. Victor moved to where Mikhail slumped in his chair, blood seeping through his expensive suit, his face pale with pain and dawning terror. "Your man talked before he died," Victor said calmly. "Told me everything, how you hired mercenaries, how you planned to grab Lena, use her as leverage to renegotiate our agreement, how you thought 3 days after we made a deal, you could break it because you saw an opportunity." "Victor, please," Mikhail gasped. "It was a mistake, a misunderstanding. I never meant—" "You meant exactly what happened. You sent men to take my wife, put a gun to her head, tried to use her as a bargaining chip." Victor's hand moved, pressing against Mikhail's wounded shoulder. The Russian screamed. "That wasn't a mistake, Mikhail. That was a choice. And choices have consequences." Lena watched it happen with a strange detachment. She should have been horrified, should have been running for the door. Instead, she felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Mikhail had tried to make her a victim again, had tried to reduce her to leverage, to property, to something that could be taken and used. Victor was making sure everyone understood that wasn't possible. "The deal we made," Victor continued, releasing Mikhail's shoulder, "is void. You get nothing. No percentage of the ports, no cooperation, no mercy. In fact, I'm taking everything. Your shipping routes, your warehouse operations, your connections with the longshoremen. All of it becomes mine, effective immediately. You can't, Mikhail started. I can. I am. Victor's smile was cold. You violated the most fundamental rule in our world. You touched what was mine. That doesn't get forgiven, Mikhail. It gets punished, permanently. The other families won't stand for this. They'll see it as overreach, as you getting soft over a woman. They'll see it as me enforcing boundaries that should never have been tested. Victor glanced at Lena, who stood by the door with her bandaged hands and torn dress, every inch the wronged wife. And they'll understand that anyone who tries the same thing ends up exactly where you are right now. Mikhail's face crumpled. What do you want? Money? Territory? Name your price, Victor. I'll pay it. There is no price. Victor straightened, brushed imaginary dust from his suit. You tried to take my wife. There's no coming back from that. No deal you can make, no amount you can pay. You're finished, Mikhail. The only question is whether you leave New York alive or in pieces. The choice was brutal in its simplicity. Lena watched Mikhail process it, saw the moment he understood that his empire was gone, that everything he'd built over decades had been destroyed in the time it took to make one catastrophically stupid decision. I'll leave, Mikhail whispered. Tonight. I'll sign over everything, disappear. You'll never see me again. No. Lena's voice cut through the room, surprising everyone, including herself. She moved forward, her heels clicking against the floor, until she stood beside Victor. You don't get to just leave. You don't get to walk away and start over somewhere else after what you tried to do. Mikhail's eyes widened. Mrs. Cade, please. You put a gun to my head, Lena continued, her voice steady despite the rage burning in her chest. You hired men to grab me off a public street. You planned to use me as leverage, as property, as a thing to be traded, and now you want mercy? I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I never should have. You're right. You shouldn't have. Lena looked at Victor. What happens to people who try to use me as leverage? Victor's expression was fierce with pride and approval. They learn why that's a fatal mistake. What did you have in mind? Lena turned back to Mikhail. You sign over everything, not just the shipping operations, all of it, every business, every asset, every connection you have. It all goes to Victor, with proper legal documentation that can't be disputed. Then you leave New York with nothing but the clothes on your back and the knowledge that you destroyed yourself. That's everything. My life's work. Should have thought of that before you tried to kidnap me. Lena's voice went hard. You wanted to play games with people's lives? Fine. Now you get to live with the consequences. Sign everything over, leave with nothing, or Victor kills you right here and takes it all anyway. Your choice, Mr. Petrov. The silence was absolute. Every man in the room stared at Lena like she'd transformed into something else entirely. The art history major who'd walked down an aisle in black 6 weeks ago was gone. In her place stood a woman who understood power, who knew how to wield it, who had learned from the best that mercy was often more dangerous than ruthlessness. Mikhail looked at Victor, desperately seeking some reprieve. But Victor just smiled, cold and sharp. You heard my wife. Make your choice. It took 3 hours to finalize. Mikhail's lawyers were called, documents were drafted and signed, assets were transferred with the kind of speed that only came from absolute desperation. By midnight, Victor Cade owned everything Mikhail Petrov had spent 40 years building, and Mikhail himself was on a plane to Prague with nothing but a single suitcase and the wounds from his catastrophically bad decision. In the car afterward, Lena was shaking, not from fear or shock, but from the sheer adrenaline of what they'd done. She'd just helped dismantle a man's empire, had watched him sign away everything he owned, and felt no remorse about it whatsoever. That was extraordinary, Victor said quietly, his hand finding hers in the darkness. The way you handled him, the terms you demanded. You've learned well, Lena. I learned from you. Lena's voice was rough. You taught me that weakness gets exploited, that mercy without strength is just an invitation for more attacks. Mikhail tested us, and we answered definitively. We did, Victor pulled her against him. The other families will hear about this within hours. They'll understand exactly what it means to threaten you. No one will dare try again. And if they do, then we'll handle them the same way, together. Victor's kiss was fierce, claiming, "You're not a victim anymore, Lena. You're not property or leverage or a weakness to exploit. You're a queen, my queen. And this city is starting to understand what that means." They made it home and straight to the bedroom, the night's violence transforming into a different kind of intensity. Victor was almost rough in his claiming, his hands demanding, his mouth hungry, and Lena met him with equal ferocity. This was partnership, power, the acknowledgement that they'd faced down a threat together and emerged stronger. Afterward, tangled in sheets and each other, Lena felt something settle in her chest, a kind of peace she'd never expected to find in Victor Cade's world. "I love you," she said into the darkness, the words surprising her even as she spoke them. "I don't know when it happened. Don't know when this became real instead of survival. But I love you, Victor, completely, terrifyingly, without reservation." Victor was silent for so long, Lena thought maybe he'd fallen asleep. Then his hand found her face in the darkness, tilting her toward him. "I loved you the moment you walked down that aisle in black," he said quietly. "The moment you looked at me like you'd rather die than surrender. I've been waiting for you to catch up ever since." Lena's breath caught. "You never said I couldn't. Not until you chose me freely, without coercion or obligation or survival instinct. Not until you stayed because you wanted to, not because you had to." Victor's thumb brushed her cheekbone. "But you chose me today. When Rebecca offered you an escape, when you could have walked away clean, you chose me. That's when I knew it was real for you, too." "It's terrifying," Lena admitted, "loving someone in this world. Knowing that every day could be the day someone tries again, that our enemies will always look for weaknesses. Then we make sure there are no weaknesses to find." Victor's voice was absolute. "We make sure everyone knows that touching you means war, that threatening us means total destruction. We make ourselves so strong, so unified, that no one dares try. Is that possible in a world like this? We're about to find out." The weeks that followed were a masterclass in consolidation. Victor absorbed Mikhail's operations seamlessly, redistributing territory among his captains with the kind of strategic precision that reinforced his position at the top of New York's underworld. The message was clear: attack the Cades, lose everything. Lena found her own role expanding. She wasn't just Victor's wife anymore. She was his partner in truth, sitting in on meetings, offering insights, using her art background to identify money laundering opportunities, and her natural strategic thinking to spot potential problems before they became crises. The captains who'd tested her that first night at dinner now sought her opinion, respected her judgment, understood that crossing her meant crossing Victor. She was no longer the Black Bride. She was Lena Cade, and that name carried weight. 3 months after the wedding, Yuri Konstantin threw a party at his restaurant to celebrate Victor's consolidation of power. It was a massive affair, every major player in New York's criminal landscape in attendance, all of them carefully paying respect to the couple who'd reshaped the city's underworld in a matter of weeks. Lena dressed in black again, a deliberate echo of her wedding dress, but infinitely more elegant. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears, Victor's gifts that had become her armor. She looked like power and elegance combined, exactly what she'd become. "Nervous?" Victor asked as they prepared to make their entrance. "Excited," Lena corrected. 6 months ago, I was a widow working in a gallery I hated, living a half-life. Now I'm here, with you, running an empire. It's surreal." "It's real," Victor assured her. "You made it real when you chose strength over surrender, when you walked down that aisle and refused to be broken." The party was everything it should have been, opulent, excessive, a display of wealth and power that reinforced Victor's position. But midway through the evening, Lena felt a wave of dizziness that had nothing to do with champagne. She excused herself to the restroom, Victor's concerned gaze following her. In the mirror, her face was pale, her eyes too bright. The nausea that had been plaguing her for the past week was back, stronger than before. Lena gripped the marble counter, breathing slowly, trying to calm the churning in her stomach. Then realization hit like lightning. She was late, 2 weeks late. And the nausea, the dizziness, the strange sensitivity to smells she'd been dismissing as stress. Lena was pregnant. The knowledge settled over her like a blanket, equal parts terror and joy. A baby. Victor's baby. A child who would be born into this dangerous world, who would carry the Cade name and all the power and peril that came with it. She needed to tell Victor, tonight. Now. Lena found him on the restaurant's balcony, looking out over Brooklyn with the kind of satisfaction that came from knowing he controlled most of what he could see. She moved to stand beside him, her heart hammering. Victor. He turned immediately, his expression shifting to concern. What's wrong? You're pale. I'm pregnant. The words hung in the cold November air. Victor stared at her, shock and something else flashing across his face, too quickly to name. You're sure? Not officially, but I'm 2 weeks late and I've been sick every morning. I'll confirm it tomorrow, but Victor, I'm sure. He pulled her against him then, his arms tight enough to hurt, his face buried in her hair. Lena felt him trembling. This man who faced down killers without flinching was shaking at the news of their child. I'm going to be a father. Victor's voice was rough, choked. We're going to have a baby. Are you happy? Lena had to ask, needed to know. Victor pulled back enough to frame her face in his hands, and the expression on his face answered before his words did. Raw joy mixed with fierce protectiveness, love so intense it took her breath away. Happy doesn't begin to cover it, he said. Terrified, yes. The thought of bringing a child into this world, into our life. But Lena will protect them. Together. We'll make sure they have everything we didn't. Safety, choice, the freedom to be whoever they want to be. They'll still be a Cade, Lena pointed out. Still a target. Then we'll teach them to be strong, to be smart, to be unbreakable, like their mother. Victor's thumb brushed her cheekbone. We'll build something better, something worth passing on. A legacy that's more than just fear and power. Can we do that? In this world? We're already doing it. Victor's smile was fierce. Look at what you've become in 6 months. Look at what we've built together. If we can do that, we can do anything. They stood there on the balcony, the city sprawling beneath them, their future suddenly more complex and precious than either had imagined. A baby. A family. A reason to be even more careful, even more ruthless, even more determined to protect what was theirs. When they returned to the party, something had shifted in the way Victor touched Lena. More careful, more protective, like she was suddenly made of glass. She almost laughed at the irony. 6 months ago, he'd been teaching her to shoot, to fight, to be unbreakable. Now he was treating her like she might shatter. Stop it, she murmured against his ear. I'm pregnant, not dying. I can still walk, still think, still be your partner. I know, but humor me. Victor's hand settled over her still flat stomach, possessive and protective. Let me be terrified and careful for a little while, at least until I adjust to the idea of everything I love being in one very breakable package. The vulnerability in his voice made Lena's throat tight. This man, brutal, dangerous, absolutely ruthless, was scared. Scared of losing her, scared of failing their child, scared of the responsibility of being a father in a world that punished weakness. We'll figure it out, Lena promised. Together, like everything else. The party wound down eventually, guests filtering out with carefully worded congratulations and promises of future cooperation. By 2 a.m, only Victor's inner circle remained. Alexei, Dmitri, Yuri, and the other captains who'd become something close to family over the past months. There's something we need to tell you, Victor announced, his arm around Lena's waist, his expression serious. Lena's pregnant. We're having a baby. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Alexei's rare smile, Dmitri's booming congratulations, Yuri's careful blessing in Russian. These men, killers and criminals all, were genuinely happy for their boss and his wife. This changes things, Yuri observed carefully. A Cade heir. The other families will see it as either a threat or an opportunity. Let them see it however they want. Victor's voice was steel. Anyone who threatens my child learns why that's the last mistake they'll ever make. Spread the word. The baby is untouchable.
protected by everything and everyone I control. Make it clear." "Consider it done," Alexei said quietly. "Congratulations, boss." "Mrs. Cade, you've built something worth protecting now." "We built it together," Lena corrected. "All of us. This organization, this family. It's not just Victor and me, it's everyone who's chosen to stand with us." The acknowledgement meant something. She could see it in their faces. These men who'd questioned her worth 6 months ago now looked at her with respect, with loyalty, with the understanding that she was as much a part of this empire as Victor himself. The months that followed were the strangest of Lena's life.
Her pregnancy progressed smoothly despite her fears, her body changing in ways that were both miraculous and terrifying. Victor became simultaneously more protective and more determined to teach her everything, as if he could transfer all his knowledge before the baby arrived and changed their world irrevocably. They legitimized more of the business, creating legal frameworks that would protect their child from the worst of their world, set up trusts, established clean companies, built a foundation that would give their son or daughter choices Victor had never had. And through it all, their partnership deepened. Lena took on more responsibilities, her pregnancy doing nothing to diminish her sharp strategic mind or her ability to negotiate with men twice her size and 10 times more dangerous. If anything, carrying Victor's child made her more formidable. Everyone understood that threatening her now meant threatening the future of the Cade Empire. 7 months after that black wedding dress, Lena stood in front of a mirror in Victor's, their, bedroom and barely recognized herself. Her body was round with pregnancy, her face had softened, but her eyes were sharp, knowing, the eyes of someone who'd walked through fire and emerged transformed. She wore black again, not mourning, but mastery. A dress that accommodated her changing shape while projecting power, diamonds that caught the light, hair swept back to reveal features that had become as familiar in the underworld as Victor's own. "Beautiful," Victor said from the doorway, his eyes tracking over her with the kind of hunger that hadn't diminished despite her pregnancy. If anything, seeing her carry his child had intensified his possessiveness, his love, his absolute determination to protect her. "We're going to be late," Lena pointed out, but she was smiling. "Let them wait." Victor moved behind her, his hands settling on her swollen belly, his reflection meeting hers in the mirror. "I want to remember this moment. You, carrying our child. The woman who walked into my life in black and refused to be anything but extraordinary." "I was terrified that day," Lena admitted. "Thought you'd kill me for the disrespect." "I almost did," Victor said honestly. "But then, I looked in your eyes and saw something that changed everything. Saw myself reflected back, someone who'd been broken and rebuilt themselves into something stronger. Someone who understood that survival meant being willing to fight even when the odds were impossible. And now? Now you're my wife, my partner, the mother of my child. Now you're the most dangerous woman in New York because you have my complete trust and total backing. Now you're exactly what I knew you could be when I first saw you in that black dress." Lena turned in his arms, awkward with her belly between them, but determined. "I love you. I don't say it enough, but I do. Completely. You saved me, Victor. Not from my father or the debt or the life I was living. You saved me from myself, from accepting that I was broken, that I deserved nothing better than half a life." "You saved yourself," Victor corrected. "I just gave you the space to do it. And you saved me too, though I didn't realize I needed it until you were already here." "Saved you from what?" "From becoming exactly what I feared. From being so consumed by power and control that I forgot why any of it mattered. You reminded me that strength without purpose is just violence, that building an empire means nothing if you have no one worth sharing it with." His hand pressed gently against her belly, against their child. "You gave me this, a family, a future, something worth protecting that isn't just territory or money or reputation." The baby kicked, hard enough that Victor felt it, and his expression transformed into something so tender it made Lena's throat tight. "They're going to be so loved," she whispered, "so protected. We'll make sure they have choices, Victor, that they can be whoever they want, not what we need them to be." "We will," Victor promised. Because we remember what it's like to have no choices, to be trapped by circumstances we didn't create. Our child won't know that. They'll know safety, options, the freedom to choose their own path. Even if that path leads away from all of this? Especially then. Victor's certainty was absolute. We'll build this empire, make it strong enough to stand without them. And if our child wants to be a doctor or a teacher or an artist, they can be. They'll have that freedom because we fought for it. They finally made it to the event, a charity gala that was really an opportunity for New York's elite to mingle with its underworld, the kind of carefully orchestrated social politics that kept everyone in their proper place. Lena had learned to navigate these functions with ease, her pregnancy making her even more effective as people underestimated a woman so visibly vulnerable. They didn't understand that vulnerability was just another kind of armor. Midway through the evening, Lena felt the first contraction. Not painful, not yet, but unmistakable. She gripped Victor's arm, saw his expression shift instantly from social smile to fierce concern. The baby? I think so. It's early, but... Another contraction, stronger this time. Victor, I think it's happening. The transformation was immediate. Victor, who'd remained calm through assassination attempts and gang wars, went pale. But his hands were steady as he guided Lena toward the exit, his voice sharp as he barked orders to Alexei. Get the car, call the doctor, clear the route to the hospital, now. The birth was long, brutal, and absolutely worth it. Lena labored through the night with Victor beside her, refusing to leave even when the nurses suggested he might be more comfortable in the waiting room. He held her hand through every contraction, whispered encouragement when she was sure she couldn't continue, and cried when their daughter finally arrived at dawn, tiny, perfect, absolutely beautiful. She's perfect, Victor breathed, his scarred hands impossibly gentle as he held their daughter for the first time. Lena, she's perfect. What should we name her? Lena was exhausted, wrung out, but had never felt more complete. Vera, Victor said immediately. It means faith in Russian, because you had faith in us when no one else did, because you believed we could build something better. Of Vera Cade. Lena tested the name. I love it. Holding their daughter, watching Victor transform from crime lord to protective father, Lena felt the final pieces of her new life click into place. This was her family. This was her future. Not the life she'd planned or expected, but something infinitely more precious. 1 year after walking down an aisle in black, Lena Cade stood on the balcony of their penthouse with her daughter in her arms and her husband beside her, watching the sun rise over a city they controlled together. She wore black still, not mourning, not defiance, but power. The power of a woman who'd refused to be broken, who'd chosen strength over surrender, who'd built an empire alongside a man who'd seen her potential when she'd seen only the end. No regrets? Victor asked quietly, his arm around her waist. Not one, Lena said honestly. This wasn't the life I chose, but it's the life I made mine. And I wouldn't change a single moment. Below them, New York glittered in the dawn light, dangerous, beautiful theirs. The black bride had become a queen. The mourning dress had become a crown. And the woman who'd walked into a cathedral expecting death had found something infinitely more valuable. She'd found herself, found love, found purpose, found home in the most unlikely place imaginable. And as Vera stirred in her arms and Victor pressed a kiss to her temple, Lena smiled. The war was won, the dynasty had begun, and the future stretched before them, dark and bright and absolutely theirs. The funeral she'd expected had become a coronation. The end had become a beginning, and the woman in black ruled alongside her king, feared and respected and absolutely unstoppable. This was her life now, her choice, her triumph. And she wore it as beautifully as she wore that first black dress, with defiance, with pride, with the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be.